Hi, guys. Miss Mitchell here today on this wonderful Wednesday, May 27th. It's crazy how quick May is almost over. It's flying by. I am here today with Oliver. He didn't want to move. I was like, I'm going to get started. He's like, he's going to listen. He's going to try to be a detective today, too, I think. So he's staring at me like, why are you talking? I want it quiet so I can sleep. We have some mysteries to solve. Okay? Anyways, he's here. He's going to help us out today. I was going to move to a place with better lighting, but I think this will do. So, today we are here with our next case of Encyclopedia Brown, and we have the case of the glass of ginger ale. Do you guys like ginger ale? Sometimes it's good. I like it for an upset stomach or something, but I don't know. It's good every once in a while. All right, so let's be thinking like Encyclopedia Brown. Get those detective caps ready. Is your detective cap ready? Yeah? Alrighty. Here we go. Chief Brown put down his cup of coffee. Do you know anything about ginger ale? He asked. It comes in a bottle, and I don't like it as much as root beer, answered Encyclopedia. What a strange question, dear, said Mrs. Brown, who was clearing away the dinner plates. It's a mighty strange case, replied Chief Brown. Rufino de Verona is in the middle of it. Rufino de Verona, exclaimed Encyclopedia. The famous blind violinist? Yes, he has a summer home on the beach, said Chief Brown. He asked me to drop by this evening. He believes he's been tricked out of his prize violin by a glass of ginger ale. Hmm. With a whopper like that ringing in his ears, Encyclopedia could hardly stay in his chair. Can I go with you, Dad? He asked. Chief Brown looked at Mrs. Brown. You may as well take him along, she said. He may never again get a chance to meet someone like Rufino de Verona, but be home by 9:30. Encyclopedia dashed to his room. He dug out his autograph book. When he reached the car, his father was waiting behind the wheel. Night was beginning to fall as they drove up to the house of the blind violinist. A maid showed them into the living room. Mr. de Verona, a tall, white haired man wearing dark glasses, came forward. Chief Brown, he said, holding out his hand. You brought someone with you, judging from the sound of sneakers. I should say a lad of 10 or 12. My son, Leroy, said Chief Brown. He's 10. So nice of you to come, too, Leroy, said Mr. de Verona. He motioned father and son to chairs, but remained standing himself. He's a very good listener. I'm almost too ashamed to tell you what happened, he said. You'll think me a fool. Over the telephone, you said you had lost your prize violin, said Chief Brown. Lost in a bet, said Mr. de Verona. I made a bet last night with Hans Braun, a concert master of the Glendon Symphony, and lost. He crossed the room to a table. On the table was a tray, several glasses, an ice bucket, and 3 bottles of ginger ale. Encyclopedia marveled at how easily the sightless musician moved among the furniture. Clara, my maid, had the night off, and Hans Braun and I were alone in the house, said Mr. de Verona. We sat in this room, and the talk soon moved from music to mysteries. Hans is especially interested in locked room puzzles. Almost before I knew it, I'd bet my Stradivarius violin against his Stradivarius, however you say that. Mr. de Verona ran his fine, strong fingers through his mop of white hair. I didn't think I could lose. Hans positively worked a miracle to win. The blind musician reached into the ice bucket. He dropped 4 pieces of ice into a tall glass. Hans said, Oh, this ice is cold, as he filled a glass with 4 pieces of ice, just as I have done, said Mr. de Verona. Then Hans gave me the glass to hold. I heard him open a bottle of ginger ale. He left the room carrying it. Mr. De Verona, glass in hand, went to the door of the living room and locked it. I locked the door after making sure that Hans was out in the hall. Next, I locked the two windows. Mr. De Verona went about locking the two windows. One was behind the piano, the other behind Chief Brown's chair. Now, there was no way of getting into the living room without breaking the windows or door. And there he is, putting the glass with ice inside the safe. Hmm. Mr. De Verona strode across the room. He stopped at an oil painting hanging on the wall and pushed it aside. Behind the painting was a wall safe. I felt in Hans' glass to make sure it was filled only with ice, he said. Then I put the glass with the ice inside the safe and locked the safe. Mr. De Verona locked the safe and replaced the oil painting. He walked to the door and switched off the lights. For a second, the lone sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock by the bookcase. Mr. De Verona's voice came from the darkness. The bet was that I was to sit in an easy chair in the middle of the room. I was to stay seated exactly 1 hour. In that hour, Hans was to enter the locked, lightless room, open the lock safe, take out the glass, remove the ice, pour into the glass the bottle of ginger ale he had carried into the hall, lock the safe, leave the room, and lock the door behind him, all without my hearing him. Hmm. Stradivarius. I knew that. That sounds familiar now. Thanks for the correct pronunciation. Mr. De Verona sat down in an easy chair in the center of the dark room. I can tell time by the raised numbers on my wristwatch, the blind musician said. After an hour had passed, I had heard nothing. I was sure I had won the bet. I unlocked the door and kept Hans talking in the hall so that I could know where he was. I crossed the room and opened the safe. The glass was still there. The ice was gone. Instead, the glass was filled by thunder with ginger ale. I tasted it. Mr. De Verona slapped the arms of his chair in bewilderment. How did Hans do it? He cried. For a long moment, the room was still. Finally, Mr. De Verona arose and switched on the lights. Chief Brown looked questioningly at Encyclopedia. Any ideas? His eyes asked. Encyclopedia nodded. May I ask a question, sir? Please do, Leroy, said Mr. De Verona. Who brought up the subject of locked rooms? Asked the boy detective. Why, now that I think about it, I suppose it was Hans, answered Mr. De Verona. What is the difference? What I want to know is why I didn't hear him. There is nothing wrong with your hearing, sir, said Encyclopedia. No man could have heard the second clue. He picked up his autograph book. Would you please sign it for me? Encyclopedia knew how Hans had filled the glass in the safe with ginger ale. Do you? So, how did he do it? Stradivarius. Maybe it was. So, how did Encyclopedia know how Hans filled up the. So, there's a glass of ginger ale in a safe that was behind a painting, locked in the safe, and somehow Hans came in without Mr. De Verona hearing him, moved the painting, unlocked the safe, filled the glass with ginger ale, then relocked the safe, put the painting back, and exited the room and relocked the door. And he didn't hear him? How? Any guesses on this one? This one's tricky. Any clues at all? Why was the ice not melted when they got there? Was it fresh ice? Hans rhymes with Johns. I know, sometimes I say Hans, sometimes I say Hans. It's my New York accent. Hans, like from Frozen. Kristoff and Hans. I think he was the bad guy. I don't know. All right. Any solutions? Why was the ice not melted? That's a good idea, but maybe it was fresh ice because it had been the night before that I think this had happened. So I think it would have made sense for them to get fresh ice. Maybe? I don't know. Hans? All right, here's our solution to this case. The first clue was Hans remark. Oh, this ice is cold. It was a silly, obvious thing to say. It made sense only if it covered up another sound he didn't want the blind violinist to hear. Encyclopedia reasoned that the other sound was Hans tearing open an insulated bag, the kind of bag which keeps ice from melting. Yes, Hans had brought his own ice. He did not take the 4 pieces of ice from Mr. de Verona's ice bucket. The pieces of ice in the glass which Mr. de Verona put in the safe were not made of water. Hans had made them by freezing ginger ale. Hans never did open the safe. He never even entered the room. He simply waited in the hall for the full hour. The second clue, the one no man could have heard, was the sound of the frozen pieces of ginger ale melting. When Mr. de Verona opened the safe, the pieces of ice had all melted, filling the glass with ginger ale. So no man could have heard it because the safe was kind of protecting that sound of the ginger ale ice cubes melting. Oh, tricky man, tricky man. He had it planned the whole time and had his frozen ginger ale ice cubes. He didn't have to do anything. He just waited for the ice to melt. Tricky, tricky. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's case. Tomorrow we will be back with our next case, and this is our final case in this book, and it is the case of the stomach puncher. Interesting. I wonder if there's going to be somebody punching stomachs. Could it be Bugs Meany? I hope not. I don't like that dude. He's mean. So the ice in the bucket was trick ice. No, he was saying that at one point he said when he was pouring his own glass, Hans poured his own glass, and when he did, he said, "Oh, this ice is cold." And as he was saying that, he was opening up his own freezer bag that he had brought with him with his own ice inside of it that he had made at home, and put that in the glass instead. So not the ice in the bucket, but the ice in the freezer bag that he brought with him. Yeah. Tricky, tricky. Smart man. All right. So once again, back tomorrow with the case of the stomach puncher. And Oliver's asleep. I don't think he solved this one. I don't know if you guys can see. He's asleep, snoring a little bit. Yeah. So good listening. Good job solving that case. I hope you guys are more awake than that, and I hope that you solved today's case, and I hope that you'll be ready tomorrow to save another one. All right. So I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye.